Did the Trojans embrace sanity during the offseason? That is the primary goal of USC's season opener Saturday evening against San Jose State. Hi, I'm James of Faithful Angelino Sports with the debut of Friday Night Chalk Talk, where we'll break down the keys and goals for each of LA's football teams during the regular season and the playoffs. Since there's very little point in breaking down the NFL preseason games, and Sansa Bruins aren't playing for another week, this is going to be all about USC. And if you like talking about the Trojans, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We talk Trojans football not just tonight, but damn near every day here. The Trojans are going to win. That's not false bravado. Damn sure isn't a hot take. I know this to be true, because even in the worst case scenario, beyond your wildest expectations worst case, USC will win. What is the worst case scenario? I can tell you. I've seen the worst case scenario, as did many of you, whether or not you have that abomination known as the Pac-12 network. The worst case scenario was a few years ago. I saw the Trojans open their season against Fresno State. That team was coached by Clay Helton. They were extremely undisciplined. They debuted the air raid offense, which the current Trojans still run, although smarter. And at the end of the first half, starting quarterback JT Daniels' leg snapped. USC still won. So even if you ask, James, what if the unthinkable happens with returning Heisman Trophy winning quarterback Caleb Williams? I would still tell you with absolute confidence that USC is going to win this game. San Jose only returns 3 starters from last year's defense anyway. They are not on Fresno State's level. Neither of those teams are on the level of the 6th-ranked Trojans. I believe the Trojans can drop a minimum of 40 points on any opponent all year with Caleb Williams. I believe they will beat the Spartans by at least 4 touchdowns. But none of that is what I mean by embracing sanity. If you look behind me on this dry erase board, which I'll bring up in a couple of moments, I don't even have the Trojans' offensive depth chart listed, because this is not about the offense. Everything about this game is about if the defense has improved or not. At the conclusion of last year, I said the same thing about the Trojans and UCLA. And if you are a longtime viewer of this channel, you know verbatim what I'm about to say, word for word. The first school to sanity wins. The first school that embraces defense as much as it does offense is the one that becomes the national powerhouse. End of story. Straight and simple. So for the Trojans, it's not just to be better than last year's defense, because that bar was super low. Last year's Trojans allowed 150 rushing yards per game. Last year's Trojans allowed 415 yards of offense per game. It's absolutely unsustainable. In sum, last year's USC team was about scoring 35 points or more and daring you to score more. Now that's an insane way of doing things. Insane. So we're talking about embracing sanity. In this game, that Trojans defense has to target San Jose State quarterback Siobhan Cordero, who threw for 3,251 yards, 23 touchdowns last year. He's also a dual threat. He rushes for 9 touchdowns. But the Spartans are extremely unbalanced on offense. In the sense that they led the Mountain West Conference in passing, rushing, not so much. Kyrie Robinson led with about 750 yards last year. Cordero, because of the pass-oriented offense, will take some hits. He was sacked 42 times last year. And the Trojans, from last year, love to blitz. What we know about the Trojans' defense is that they like to force the issue. It's pressure that leads to sacks, hopefully turnovers, but at worst, big gaps in the defense. Big gaps. If you blitz somebody, you leave a hole where that defender once was. That's the holes that many teams exploited as the season went on. That's why people were understandably calling for defensive coordinators Alex Grinch's head. Now, I will grant you that this whiteboard looks like the Trojans run a 4-2-5. In reality, it will really look more like a 3 3-5, in the sense that one side of the defensive end, whether it's rush end or defensive end, will drop back into coverage. If you recall last year's UCLA game, Corey Foreman did just that with his game-clinching interception. In a sense, Grinch is not a complete idiot. I have spoken with offensive coaches, offensive coordinators in the past when I was a sports writer, and they have all said that the 3-3-5, like I said, it'll look more like a 3-3-5 in practice, is a bitch to scheme against, because you know the blitz is coming, but you just don't know where from. You don't know where from. Again, though, as the season wore on, people got wise to Grinch's act. They kind of guessed where the blitzes were coming from. They exploited the holes from whoever was leaving their spot to blitz. The Trojans would get gashed. So is it coaching or personnel? That's what tomorrow's game's about, folks. The turnover is everywhere other than defensive coordinator. Consider the linebackers. We have 2 new starters now. In Artackett Curtis, the first freshman to start at middle linebacker since 2015, and transfer Mason Cobb. Eric Gentry, Shane Lee. I'm not trying to tell you they're yesterday's news. They could still wind up getting back into the starting lineup. But the coaches have been raving about Curtis and Cobb. Their speed from end to end. And that speed is important because if you're blitzing from somewhere, one of these 2 guys is going to have to basically man up and cover more ground than what they normally should. You might also take note of what appears to be stability. If you're looking at this depth chart, you might note the stability in the defensive backfield. Kalen Bullock is projected to be an NFL starter. Both corners returned from last year. But for my money, I'm looking at backup nickel back, Christian Roland Wallace. I have a guess. I could be wrong with the guess. But I've been reading stories that Lincoln Riley, Rams coach Sean McVay, and current Trojans assistant, former Arizona Cardinals coach Cliff Kingsbury are thick as thieves. They share offensive insights. Is it possible they share defensive insights? The Rams like to take a defensive back and line that defensive back anywhere on the field to be a threat. They did so with Jalen Ramsey. If you take a look at the quotes from USC's defensive coaches, they say they feel comfortable lining up Christian Roland Wallace anywhere. Is that a wrinkle that we're going to see this year? Is Christian Roland Wallace going to be the star of the USC defense as Jalen Ramsey was for the Rams? I'm not saying I know. I'm saying it's a possibility. The big question, obviously, by looking at this depth chart, though, is the defensive line. Please note all the extra names I've scribbled down. There's a reason for that, because they're all going to get playing time tomorrow. Circulating in, circulating out, there are jobs to be had on this D line. They don't have enough intel yet to get that stability. Both rush ends came in listed as a transfer, looking for the job. Both rush ends are transfers. So are Bars, Sullivan, Bear Alexander, same thing. Most of these names were praised by the coaches. Now, I believe from what I've read that Jack Sullivan and Keon Bars are going to get the first bite at the apple. But just being in there for the first play doesn't mean squat. By the way, size, the defensive line is bigger than last year too. If you noticed that I did not write Corey Foreman's name down on this depth chart, you're right. Foreman, the former top recruit in the nation, will get snaps if the Trojans make it a runaway. What I'm trying to do here is to give you the intel as to who will get the quality time as the Trojans try to figure out what their defense is going to be about for the rest of the season. This is about intel. I don't need to give you 17 names at defensive tackle. I'm just going to tell you the ones that are definitely going to get the snaps. Foreman simply hasn't given the coaches enough. And Alex Grinch, he's not that stupid. He's not. He knows damn well he's coaching for his job. And Solomon Byrd is light years ahead of him in terms of results and abilities. So the ideas are for the defense. Become better at confusing the opponent as to where the blitz is coming from. A big chunk of that is going to be on Grinch, but then improving the speed and athleticism so that any holes in the defense from a blitz do not lead to explosive plays. Or as Riley told the LA Times, quote, more good players, less bad players, unquote. The goals, therefore, it's not a win. They're going to win. The goal is not sacks. Cordero is going to get sacked. The Spartans scored more than 20 points per game, 27 points per game last year. 27. If San Jose passes 20 points, all of this defense sucked. Straight up. Score more than 20, the defense sucked. Less than 2 touchdowns, maybe you should have hope. So in sum, the Trojans are going to win this game, even in the worst case scenario. But the question remains, has USC regained its sanity? Glorious, optimistic, boring, defensive sanity. If you enjoyed this preview, don't forget to subscribe to Faithful Angelinos. We talk Trojans football almost every day here. And we will have previews every week during the season on Friday nights. Thank you for watching. I'm James. We'll be back tomorrow morning. Faithful Angelinos is a Kia and Corte El Queso production. Take care.